The following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel. And I will call to order our June 15th Cary Planning and Zoning Board meeting. We will begin by adopting our agenda. Do we have any changes? If there are none, can we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
We have a motion, second.
I'll second.
Motion, second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Next, we need to approve our May 18th regular meeting minutes. Do we have any corrections, additions? Seeing none, can we get a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve, second?
Second.
Motion, second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And next, we come to our first case that's going to require a public hearing, and that is case 15 CPA 03. And before I do that, I just want to highlight some of the rules for our public hearings, if you will. Just give me a minute, I'll make it quick. We'll start a public hearing with a staff presentation that provides factual data on the case. I'll then open the public hearing, and we will first hear from the applicant if they choose to speak, after which we will hear from anyone else that wants to address us on the proposed case. I should point out that the applicant gets 10 minutes, and then each speaker gets 5 minutes. You're going to notice a little black box on the podium over here. When you begin, that black box will have a green light on it. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, that light will turn to yellow or orange, and at 5 minutes, it will become red, and at that point in time, I'm going to ask you to stop to be fair to other speakers. I ask if you have multiple speakers with the same perspective that maybe you pick a spokesman, and I ask you to address your comments to all members of the board. We will not respond to you. This is our chance to listen. It is not in our process to allow for an interchange at that point. That, I think, completes my setup, and so would you please give us CPA 03?
Yes, good evening. For your consideration, staff is recommending a public hearing tonight to remove the rural road standards in the southwest area of the Comprehensive Transportation Plan as directed at the March 24, 2015 Council work session. The current Comprehensive Transportation Plan is illustrated in this slide, Street cross-sections in the green level area currently follow the rural road design standards adopted in the Southwest Area Plan. This slide shows the proposed comprehensive transportation plan. The roadway widths are not proposing to change and will remain consistent with the current plan. All roads will be built with the town's typical standard to include urban amenities such as sidewalks, streetlights, and curb and gutter. There were no speakers at the public hearing. A council member asked if this amendment could result in streets that have both rural and urban cross-section and amenities. Staff responded that developer requirements would remain consistent with the adopted comprehensive transportation plan. There are no plans in place to bring existing roads with the rural section up to an urban standard, but future development would require those improvements. Staff recommends that the planning board conduct a public hearing and refer the proposed amendment to the June 25th Town Council meeting for action. Staff is available for any questions.
Thank you. And in this case, since the staff is the applicant, I think we can open the public hearing for comments from anyone else in the gallery that would like to address us. Anyone at all? Seeing no one approach the podium, I'm going to close the public hearing and open this case up for board questions.
I have a question.
Please.
So this one kind of took me by surprise because when we did the Southwest Area Plan, I mean, the idea was to use very low density and, part of that, look and feel of rural area was to leave the roads as rural design. So I haven't been able to find out what the incentive was, why this request has come forward.
The request came from Town Council from their March 24th, 2015 work session. I believe at that time they felt that the area grew and has grown in sort of an urban way and wanted the road network to follow that standard.
That's interesting because it's grown exactly as the plan lays out. As far as I know, there haven't been any rezonings that came in that, weren't consistent with the original plan.
Yeah, this was their wish from that Town Council work session. I was not present, but we have gone through and made that amendment request.
So the other issue I have, and I'm going to show my ignorance about curb and gutter because I've never lived in a curb and gutter area. Where exactly does the water go when it goes in the gutter? Is that tied into the sewer system?
I'm going to refer that question to Mr. Matt Flynn. He's here and he can help shed some light on that.
Good evening, board members. My name is Matt Flynn. I'm with the Stormwater section of the Water Resources Department. We have a separate sewer system. We have a sanitary sewer system, which is treated via wastewater treatment plant, and a storm drain system, which is nothing more than gravity flow via storm drain pipes.
Okay, so I think it's probably safe to say that we currently have no storm drain pipes in this area.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
We don't have any storm drain pipes in this area. Is that true?
Actually, we do have storm drain pipes. There are storm drain pipes located at various communities. The Southwest Area Plan, when it came in, had ditch sections which kind of mimicked Wake County rural sections. But there are storm drain pipes insofar as cross pipes. Like if you got to Copperleaf and things like that, you'll have cross pipes that are storm drain pipes. The difference being is one's an open system and one's a closed system.
What does that mean, an open system? The storm drain
Ditch
pipes?
versus pipe.
Okay. So I'm looking at these collector roads and, for instance, look at Ridgeback and Green Level. There's a lot of development going on in between those two roads. And so if, for instance, on Ridgeback, which for everyone's information I happen to live on, if they were to develop and put in curb and gutter, would they have to complete a storm drain system? Because right now there's nothing there. I don't understand where the...
I think Ridgeback is actually in the upper New Hope. That's not in that area.
No.
Yeah, it is. I promise.
Ridgeback is in that area. It comes off from towards the east from White Oak Church. It's a gravel, it's a gravel facility right now. But I think as he was stating, yes, you would put in that curb and gutter when it was built out to a collector street system, and then you would see that on that facility.
So when these 4 subdivisions that are going in now develop, and Ridgeback is improved to collector standards on one side, but there's nothing on either side, where does the water go that goes in that? Are you saying that it's just going to be a ditch, it's not going to be a drain system?
From a stormwater perspective, when you have a closed system, from a stormwater treatment perspective, you have a closed system, it's going to go to a stormwater management pond and for treatment. If you have an open system, it'll do the same. So the water is going to collect and convey to a stormwater management system depending upon the intensity of the development. The difference being is that with an open ditch system, developers can develop to a higher density without treatment than they can with a closed system. So it's all going to collect and go and discharge to the low gravity point. And depending upon the intensity of development, there may or may not be stormwater management required.
Okay, so in this case, the stormwater management would be on site for those subdivisions. They would collect that water and send it somewhere on site.
Any development that has, that crosses the threshold with respect to stormwater management requirements would have to do exactly that. They'd have to treat on site.
Okay.
As development occurs, the frontage, these thoroughfares would have to be captured and treated to the maximum extent practicable, depending upon gravity, too. So there's always a catch in place to ensure that treatment occurs if it's required.
Okay, I just want to make sure that in this case, when they do this, they don't discharge, collect all the water and discharge it off-site.
With respect to any sort of road development, it has to go through DOT review. It has to go through NC-DENA review. So linear projects that are linear in nature and not associated with any sort of subdivision or site plan has got to meet all environmental requirements that NC-DENA would do for no different than any other DOT road.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you, Carl. You
I think
educated us a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's it. I had no idea how that worked. And, you know, when we talked about how we would have roads where some of it would be built out to the new standards and some wouldn't, you know, we were talking about aesthetics, or that they were at the town council meeting, but we actually are having water managed and collected on some sites and not on others. So I didn't understand how that would work.
Other questions?
Thank you.
I will note that the staff report was pretty clear. Didn't raise an awful lot of questions. In that case, if we have no further questions, do we have a motion? This is where somebody speaks up.
I'm still on the fence.
I'll make a motion. I move that the board forward case number 15 CPA 03 to town council with a recommendation for approval to amend the land use plan as proposed.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Sure, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? You have anything?
Well, typically, when we have something like this, we go through a work session and we do a lot of fast and dirty questions from staff. Unfortunately, in this scenario, we didn't have one. And I'm a little surprised at that, but because there's a lot of material in here, and obviously there are some things that I'm sure would have generated some questions. The fact that the council wants this to be a done deal, and the fact that it seems reasonable, And the fact that, obviously, at some point in time, this is going to change from a more rural quadrant to a much more urban, suburban quadrant. I think we do have to move forward and recognize that probably the existing terminology was a little out of date. So that's why I don't see any problem with putting this forward to the council with our approval.
Well, I agree this is a rural area right now, but I think there's going to be growth to the west and south of there where people will be traveling on those roads. So changing those roads, I think is a good idea.
And I'll
Yeah.
just observe, I live in a subdivision that's in the middle of Cary, and we don't have curb and gutter. We have the gullies along the road, side of the road, and they empty into BMPs, stormwater management facilities. So I'm pretty sure it works because I've been here for 22 years, and so far it's been pretty effective. Seeing no other, anyone else have anything to say?
Well, I just, I'm going to vote for the motion. I'm still struggling with whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, just based on what they told me. Of course, I have a little bit of a personal quandary because I live at the bottom of the hill of all this development. So if all that water was going to run down to my place and this is going to stop it, it's going to capture it on site, that's a good thing. If it's, going to use the bottom of the hill as the best management practice, probably not so good for me. I better up my flood insurance. But I'm going to trust that it will be handled properly. Street lights out there are going to be a brand-new thing. People come out there to, look at the stars because we don't have the light pollution, so that's gone. But you're right, things are changing. So, if they're going to change and we're going to have people there, then we need to have the proper facilities.
Other comments? In that case, we'll call it to a vote. All those, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to address your concern with respect to the best management practice. It wouldn't be in the public right away. As development occurred, they would capture and bring it onto the site to the maximum extent practicable. If it was a road and linear project in and of itself, then the treatment would be in the right of way. So it would never be on private property.
Thank you. I thought that's what you said. I was hoping that's what you said. Okay.
Seeing no other comments, we'll call this to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously, and we will now go to
Thank you.
thank you very much. Our first case without a public hearing, and that's our round 32 items A and B land development ordinance amendments.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Mrs. Bierman couldn't be here tonight, so I'm filling in for her. For your consideration are ordinance amendments for round 32. For your consideration is the transportation development fees, simply clarifying existing wording so that it's consistent with local legislation and current implementation practices. And then the second item is the Conservation Residential Overlay District standards, which you just heard Mr. Bray present. And this would eliminate the aspect of the pedestrian connectivity associated with the rural road classification. These items were presented to Town Council for an initial public hearing on May 21st. Following your recommendation tonight, they will go to Town Council for a final determination on June 25th. There were no citizen or council comments at the public hearing on either of these items. And this concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions you have.
Thank you. That has to be the quickest LDO amendment presentation I've heard in 7.5 years here.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty easy one. Do we have any questions? I think this is probably an easy one. So seeing no questions, can we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion. I move that the board forward LDO Amendment 15, LDO, well, I'm not sure what the number is. It says PL 15061. to Town Council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? We'll call this to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, I guess, 8 to 0. That's unanimous as well. We will go down to our last case, which is 15 REZ 03, 1010 Road and West Lake subdivision. Ms. Grennan.
Thank you. This is a request to rezone an assemblage of lots equaling approximately 55.62 acres located east of Lawdraker Road, south of 1010 Road, and to the west of Westlake Road. Subject property is highlighted in yellow. Here's an aerial view of the subject property. Large portions of the property are vacant. There was some farmland. There was some detached residential dwellings on the property. This slide depicts the location of stream buffers in the vicinity of the property. And according to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, there is a required street side trail located along 1010 Road, highlighted in blue. Cary's transportation plan identifies 1010 Road and Westlake Road as collectors, and Lawdraker Road, as thoroughfares, and Lawdraker Road is a collector road. Cary's land use plan designation is low-density residential. The existing zoning is Wake County, residential 30. There is an associated annexation accompanying this request. The proposed zoning is residential 12, conditional use. Conditions proposed by the applicant would limit the use to detached residential and neighborhood recreation, set a maximum of 105 dwelling units, limit the maximum density to 2 dwelling units per acre, and there is a condition that says an average lot size would not be less than 12,500 square feet. Minimum lot size with the R12 zoning district is 12,000. There could be some lots larger than that, but the average lot size could not fall below the 12,500. There's also a number of traffic mitigations that were offered by the applicant that address several of the suggestions that were recommended in the traffic analysis that was conducted in January, and those are detailed in your staff report. At the Town Council public hearing and feedback that staff received from adjacent property owners, there was concern about lot size and compatibility with adjacent neighbors, concerns about buffering, traffic impacts, road access points, questions about where the road network would take place. And there were also some calls and questions from some adjacent property owners that were interested in finding out what their development opportunities were, whether or not they'd be able to take advantage of connections to water and sewer and utilities. There are 2 historic homes on the property, one located at 8301 Lawdraker Road, and then a second property located at 3640 Westlake Road. As you can see in this slide, the property at 3640 Westlake Road has had a number of renovations that are pretty apparent and obvious just with the photograph. This particular parcel was of more concern and interest both to staff and to the town council members. A representative from our staff, Anna Redling, met with the applicant and with a representative from the Capital Area Preservation and went to the site. A letter was provided to the applicant by Gary Roth with Capital Area Preservation, noting the number of significant renovations that had taken place on the home and changes, and that there would be no objection to this property not being saved for historic purposes by Capital Area Preservation. So that letter will go into the case file and be available. At this time, I'd like to call upon the applicant, and following the applicant's comments, I'll be available for your questions.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bruce Herbert. I live at 227 Strathburg Lane here in Cary. I represent Reliable Developers in Royal Oaks Building Group, building company locally here. And just like to say, we're very excited about bringing a high-quality neighborhood to Cary. I think this is a tremendous location, and we've been working on this very hard to try to get to this point. Just want to point out a couple of things. As Deborah mentioned, we're consistent with the land use plan for low-density residential. I guess that allows 1 to 3 acres, and we're right at 2 units per acre. We're also asking for R12 zoning, and just based on recent discussions from council, feel like that's consistent with their desires for larger lots to be developed in Cary moving forward. We met with our neighbors, as was discussed, and had a good feedback from them, both at our meeting, and then many of them came to the public hearing. And I think that for the most part, a lot of the issues, especially those regarding connectivity and stormwater, will be addressed at site plan. And so we'll have more answers for them as we get to that stage of our development. We also, as you know, did have a TIA, traffic impact analysis done. There'll be extensive improvements done to West Lake Road and into Lawdraker, and also to 1010 with this development. And I think we brought you up to date on the historical significance of the house. We had Gary Roth from Capital Area Preservation. It's a beautiful house from the outside, but it's pretty well been changed completely on the inside, so doesn't have a lot of historical significance. But I'm available for any questions that you might have about the project. Again, we're excited about the opportunity to build a high-quality neighborhood here. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll open this up for board questions.
I have a question. You mentioned there was 2 houses, and one of them on Westlake Road seemed it was quite modified. And that was the one that had the letter, or both houses had the letter?
The one that had the letter was the one that was the concern because of the appearance looking, it was obvious from the one on Westlake Road that it had been renovated.
Right. But
So
what about the other one?
This is the one that had the renovations, interior renovations on it, 8301 Lawdraker Road. It's the one that they actually went and did the site visit on to get inside the house and look at it.
Oh.
It was obvious from the outside that 3640 Westlake Road had many renovations to it already.
Okay, so the letter is for both houses?
No, the letter pertains to this one, 8301
Okay,
Lawdraker
this was
Road.
obvious, okay.
The other one was obvious to everyone that it had major renovations to it, so we didn't conduct a site visit there.
Thank you.
Other questions?
The 20-foot landscape area, so, we talk about type A buffer, type B buffer. This is not even that, it's just some landscaping.
Right, when you have 2 Class 2 land uses abutting each other, a Class 2 is anytime you have a detached residential lot that's 8,000 square feet in size or greater, that's a Class 2. When you have 2 Class 2 uses adjacent to each other, the ordinance requirement is a 20-foot wide landscape strip or area, and that can be contained within the lot. It is not required for that to be in a common open space area.
And I would assume because it belongs to the lot, there's really no way to enforce that it remains landscaped.
It is a requirement that the property owner maintain it, to a type B standard.
Okay.
And it does present more of a challenge for zoning compliance officers because you can't just go to the homeowners association. If there's a violation, you have to go to the individual property owners.
Okay, type B, that helps.
But part of the justification is usually with a Class 2, you're going to have a larger lot, larger rear yard setback, a little bit more room for yards.
Okay.
Other questions?
I have a few, if I may. First, I'll follow up on Carlos. There's no delineation between property that's annexed versus property that's still on the county. It's tight.
We look at the lot size,
Last-
correct. Mhm.
Okay. Speaking of the annexations, are there any other annexations or rezonings in the pipeline in that area? I noticed there was only one R12 in the land use plan, so I just
Right, this
trying
is
to get a
the,
handle on all of
yeah,
it.
this is the closest, the very closest. There's other property further south off of Westlake Road that's part of Cary.
But nothing else in the pipeline for annexation that we're aware of at this point?
Not at the moment, correct.
And I guess my biggest question is trying to reconcile in my head how to make the numbers work. I know we're at 105 units on 55.6 something acres. That comes to a little less than 2. I was expecting to see a substantial stream buffer or something that would preclude a lot of this lot being used, because then, what I'm trying to get to is, we've got these R12 lots, 12,500 minima, but it seems like it's, theoretically, we could put those entire 105 in one concentrated place. I'm trying to see if there's anything that would force that to happen. Is there something I'm missing?
There would be a requirement for a 50-foot streetscape on 1010 Road and a 50-foot streetscape on Westlake Road, and a requirement for a 30-foot streetscape on Lawdraker Road. And yes, there is a fairly significant stream buffer, which would require field determination at the time of development plan review. Exactly how the lots are going to be laid out, I don't have that information yet.
Okay, and then I remember watching the public hearing. There was a lot of concern about the non-annexed lots that are surrounding there are significantly larger. So I'm assuming there's a transitional thought that goes into this as well. Just guessing that might be why.
Yeah, this is the summary of the adjacent lot sizes.
Oh, great.
So you've got everything from just less than a half an acre to a full acre immediately adjacent, large, basically undeveloped lot along 1010 Road. But the development to the south, immediately adjacent to the property, they're about 3/4 of an acre and up. The thing to consider or remember is they're on well and septic, so that's why they have to be that size.
And your graphic read my mind for the last question I have, which is, this is an assemblage of lots. When we calculate the dwelling units per acre, each individual owned lot does not have to meet that too.
No.
It is the assemblage
The
in
assemblage,
total.
correct. All 14 properties coming together will be part of one development plan.
You've answered everything. Thank you very much.
I just have one question. Because this is going to be annexed, it will still require to go adjacent with our, champion tree ordinance and
Oh,
everything,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
At
It's
the
pretty
time
wooded
of
lot.
development plan, they'll have to submit a tree survey.
So I guess I'd like to pipe in with a couple questions here. It looks like this is going to be an island annexation. It's going to be surrounded on,
No, it's not a satellite annexation. We do have already annexation along 1010 Road and Westlake Road. So it is contiguous.
it is, well,
The road itself.
The road itself
the
has
road,
been annexed.
you know, I get the road itself. My concern here is we create a little chunk of Cary surrounded by a whole bunch of Wake County folks that probably moved out there because they didn't want to be part of Cary. And I certainly understand the history that has us owning 1010 Road. But I'm wondering, how does this evolve? How does this area?
It's owner initiated. That's the way all of the annexations come in is, the property owner or future developer petitions to the town to ask for annexation so
I
they can
got the
develop it.
process. I'm trying to figure out.
And they want well and septic. They want utility lines out there to provide water and sewer, not well and septic, but water and sewer. So that's, if you're going to connect to Cary utilities, you need to be annexed.
So the reality is, we're going to have a little section of Cary that is going to be surrounded on all sides except for a road by unincorporated.
This is all in our land use plan. All this area to the south of 1010 Road is all in our urban service area and land use plan.
And then one other question, this one's about the traffic mitigations. In reading through the staff report, I had a little hard time getting a clear sense that the proposed traffic mitigations addressed all of our concerns.
They do not address everything that was identified in the traffic analysis. The applicant can speak to that further. They get a list in the traffic study that summarizes all the recommendations, and then the applicant voluntarily offers what they feel is appropriate, what they're prepared to address. So I'll be happy to ask the applicant to speak to that.
Well, let me press to my real question here. What is being offered? Is it adequate?
Is it?
Is it adequate to meet our town of Cary needs?
Mr. Jensen, would you like to, or Mr. Konda, would you like to speak to that?
And by the way, I appreciate that this is a question asking for an opinion, but the reality is that we got to get some sense whether the developer is offering enough to make this a reasonable compromise for the town of Cary.
My name is Priyatham Kanda. I'm with the Transportation and Facilities Department. Good evening.
Is this your first time with us?
No, I've been here a couple of times.
Okay. I just didn't recognize you. Maybe you were here when I wasn't around. I just wanted to welcome you.
Thank you. Yeah. So our land development ordinance requires an intersection to function at a level of service D or better. So traffic analysis shows the levels of service under existing conditions and build-out conditions. And most of the improvements the applicant has offered do meet the LDO requirements. And as Ms. Grannon had pointed out, there's one or two improvements that were shown as recommendations in the traffic study. However, the applicant has not offered to do those improvements. And I can defer the question to the applicant as to why they were not offered.
Well, I guess the question I'd love to get answered then is, the things that aren't offered, are they likely to cause the traffic situation to not be at a D in any of these intersections?
I do not have a definitive answer for that, but one of the improvements that was recommended in the study was a traffic signal at 1010 Road and Lawdraker Road. However, that signal can only be installed if warranted and approved by NCDOT. And as of today, or as of the build conditions, the signal appears to be warranted only during the AM peak hour. There are several criteria that the warrant analysis looks at, and that is one of the several criteria for a signal. And I believe there was a reason the applicant has not offered, but I would let the applicant speak for that.
Would the applicant like to talk to us about that?
Thanks. The reason why we haven't offered that is that it is not warranted currently by DOT, and so we can't presume that, DOT would allow that light to be installed out there to begin with. I mean, it does require their approval to be able to install it. So, when I read the report, the staff report just the other day, actually it was the first time that item had come up. So, I've not had tremendous amount of discussion about it, but my answer would be, at this time, it's not warranted by DOT. They wouldn't allow that construction, to my belief, and so we wouldn't put that requirement on us to install that light. And, you know, the only other item that I saw in the staff report was for 150 foot of turn lane that was going southbound on Westlake, and we certainly wouldn't have any problem putting that in, but my understanding was that we were already going to be improving the roadway to its future alignment, meaning that, you know, it's going to be a 4-lane road out there with a divided median, and so there wouldn't be another turn lane, if you follow me, if we built it to that condition. There wouldn't be a need for an additional turn lane. So that's an issue that, you know, if I'm being required to do less than what I think I'm required to do, then certainly we'd put that turn lane in. That would be significant savings over what we anticipated having to spend out there, because we'll be, I think, building it all along our frontage to the full build out of that road when it's totally improved, you know, going all the way down to Westlake schools down there, you know, at that 4-lane condition. Does that help you?
It does help.
Can I throw something in here comment-wise?
Sure.
I believe that there are no traffic lights between Holly Springs Road and Westlake for any of those developments on the south side of 1010. Am I correct on that?
I think you are. Yeah, I think you are. There's just.
So all of this development has occurred with no
Yeah, I mean, I
traffic
think
light.
that there's only, you know, Lawbreaker is not a road that continues on it, dead ends
Dead
down
end.
southwest. And then there's Orchard Knoll, which I think is the same situation. So, you know, getting up to the amount of traffic that's required for DOT off of those roadways that don't, you know, that don't have a lot of homes on them is difficult. They're the ones that control the road.
Other questions?
I'd just like to ask one follow-up question, if I could. Deborah, on the previous question about the somewhat island annexation here of this piece of property, where is the next closest property that is within the town's jurisdiction?
That would be right on the south side of 1010 Road, adjacent to Orchard Knoll.
Okay.
R12 conditional use.
So it's not far from being contiguous. So we don't see any particular issues with
Providing
town
services.
services in one isolated area, you know.
Correct.
You can, utilities
That's
are
part
a
of,
big
yeah.
issue, but when you deal with garbage collection and trash and public safety service, and
Correct. That's part of our evaluation with the annexation, is to determine whether or not we can serve that area, and there were no issues identified with that.
okay, thank you.
So the closest fire department and police department, substation were within reasonable?
We send information out to all of those departments, and there were no issues identified.
There is a county fire station on the north side of 1010 between Holly Springs and this site that I imagine would service.
If it's a county fire station, that would service it until such time as it's annexed, and then it would fall under Cary's.
Drop onto Cary's responsibility.
Right, but once it becomes annexed into the town limits, then it would be served by Cary.
Now, you said, Ms. Grannon, that there are some additional extraterritorial annexations south of this site,
Yeah,
heading down towards Westlake Middle.
correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Perhaps we could have a motion then.
I'll make a motion. I move that the board forward case number 15REZ03 to the town council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans, and is reasonable in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Well, I see this as one of those areas that is going to be developed. It's just a matter of time as we see growth not only to the west, but also to the south of Cary's jurisdiction. The presentation at this point seems to be, while we're looking at smaller lot sizes in the R12 designation than some of the contingent spaces here, it still seems to be a reasonable use of this space. We see no issues with the historic housing that exists on site. The request meets our current land development ordinance requirements, so therefore I would recommend approval.
Do you have something to
Well,
add?
my thought on this was just if this had been sitting in the city of Cary somewhere, this would have kind of been what we typically call a no-brainer. It meets all the criteria of the land development ordinance. In terms of the traffic mitigation, I do feel like they're doing their fair share. There's one item that isn't being, or two items that aren't being addressed. I don't really know whether the 150-foot southbound access for Westlake is all that necessary, but it is heading towards the direction of the school, so maybe it makes sense. The traffic signal, again, I'm back to all of those roads on the south side of 1010 do not have signalments. And where it's a dot road, it's kind of out of our hands to some degree. But when you bring in the fact that it does look like instead of it being a donut hole, it's a hole of a donut that's been placed somewheres. And in a way, it may seem maybe not exactly perfect, but this whole area is developing quickly. So I just feel this is pretty straightforward. I don't see a whole lot of problems with it.
Other comments?
Yeah. So I'm not going to support the motion. I know on paper everything looks fine, but I drove this area. I went through the R12 development that is, outlined on here. And, they were very nice homes, but they were packed in there. I mean, there was no yard. They were just wall-to-wall, big, nice homes. I also drove down South Point and Summer Oaks, and those are also nice homes, and they are on large lots, large wooded lots. And I tried to imagine what it would look like if the R12 that I saw was placed right behind these homes, and it was jarring. I mean, and typically when we see something like this, we also see conditions that, indicate that they will put larger lot sizes around the peripheral so that, you're not putting 2 or 3 houses behind an existing house. And there's not much of a setback, and there's no buffer to speak of. So I really feel like it could have been better. As for the light, 1010 traffic is horrific. It's terrible. I realize there are no more lights, but there needs to be. And it looks like Lawdraker collects a lot of homes and takes it up to 1010. And, the fact that it's not warranted now doesn't mean that it wouldn't be warranted when these additional homes are here. I don't know that we have that data. So I would like to have seen, a condition where if it were warranted, that they would put it in. I really think that, 1010 is a direct route to Lake Tech. And my husband drove this every day, and every day he saw terrible accidents, even at signalized lights. So I think, for the sake of safety, it would have been a good idea. I think, like I say, it looks good on paper. I think it could have been better. I think that the people who live there deserve a little bit better, so I'm not going to support the motion.
Other comments? Mark?
Likewise, I think I'll oppose this as well, but for a different reason. I'm thinking more procedurally. 2 years ago, when I contemplated coming on the Planning and Zoning Board, I looked at old videos of some of the meetings, and some of the most contentious ones involved annexations in these, like you mentioned, sort of islands, and people came in and they all had the same colored T-shirts, and they were hooting and hollering, all sorts of stuff going on. And I've always thought when I got on here that these would be some of the most contentious, and we've only had one or two, and they haven't been that contentious. This has to be the quietest annexation case I've seen come by just in my short time here. And what caught my eye when I looked at the public hearing was, to my recollection, this is probably the largest annexation and rezoning case that didn't have any changes to the zoning conditions compared to the number of people who spoke at the public hearing who had something they wanted to get off their chest. And I'm going to be presumptuous for a moment and assume some of the folks in our gallery today were here because they possibly felt that if there was a chance for them to be heard, they would like to be heard. But we can't do that today. There is no public hearing simply because there were no zoning condition changes from the town council meeting to here. But by Carl and myself voting against it, it takes this off the town council consent agenda. They must now debate this and vote on it separately. Otherwise, had we voted for this thing unanimously, they could have just put it in the consent agenda, and it would have definitely been the quietest one. And I just think for all the folks that I heard who had something to say, and with all respect and admiration to the applicant, you have, like you said, addressed most of their problems or concerns already, or at site plan, you're going to handle most of them, because most of their things were really site plan issues. But I've just never seen a case with as many points of discussion in the public hearing to have nothing changed in the zoning conditions that we could talk about or at least hear from the public on. For that reason alone, I want to make sure that this at least gets one more vetting by town council. And you beat me to the punch, but at least with our 2 no votes, they can't do it on consent. So that's why I'll oppose it.
Okay. Other comments?
Well, I was going to oppose it for the same reason. I think that it warranted a lot of comments, and it's just too easy to come here and just say yes. And so I'm with Carla and Mark.
Interesting. Well,
Other comments?
I also I understand that the applicant was very good about voluntarily offering different zoning conditions and trying to not make it much of a different lot size per the zoning, but again, I'm going to vote against it because I think of the comments that you've made about the transition to the other areas and the traffic. So.
Other comments?
I guess I'm last, so I will.
No, you aren't last because I'm
I'm
going to
not
say
last.
something.
Okay, well, second to last. I guess that'll do. I'm actually going to vote in favor. I think that while it's not the ideal situation and it's not perfect, rarely do we have anything that comes across our desk that is 100% perfect. And as previously stated by my colleagues, it does meet the LDO land use plan in this particular region. So for that reason, I'm going to vote for it.
I guess it's my turn.
Yes.
Someone mentioned, you mentioned having watched those videotapes of those previous meetings. Well, I was unfortunately in some of those. And so I start off with a little bit of heartburn based upon the experience we've had with, both donut hole involuntary annexations and then the Stop Cary movement that was, I guess it's still somewhat vocal in some parts. Every time we have one of these island annexations or satellite annexations, I realize that 1010 Road is Cary dirt, so you can say it's not an.
But I just want to clarify, this is not an involuntary, this is owner initiated.
No, I appreciate that this is a voluntary, I'm just going back historically. And I can see a case where we're going to create our own little set of donut holes as we do each one of those voluntary annexations around areas that aren't interested in getting annexed right now. And I see 10 years from now, some members of this board having to deal with the whole satellite issue again without any mechanism to address it. Now, I understand that's the reality. You know, can't get around the fact that this is contiguous with Cary. It meets our land use plan. I, like other members, would have loved to see a little bit softer transition in density. Because the reality is the houses around it are larger lots. I appreciate that when you're going to put utility services, city utility services in, that you do so because it allows you to get higher density. I wish we would have seen a little bit more of a compromise on that as well. I'm going to support the case, but I'm really glad that it's not going to be on consent. And I appreciate each of your comments because I will report them to the town council. So if there are no other comments, I'm going to call this for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Can we get hands on this one? Okay, so I see that as 4. And all those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, so I see that as 4, so we split right down the middle. That guarantees it's going to be off of consent. And I appreciate your comments. Give you something to say. I don't have any new business other than to thank Mr. Evangelista for keeping this ship afloat in my absence. I appreciate it. You stepped in diligently, I understand. It's,
My pleasure.
I might even ask you to do it again sometime. With that said, can we get a motion to adjourn, please?
I motion.
We have a motion. We have a second, somebody?
I'll second that.
All right, motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are closed.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.